All right, so today I want to talk about how you could use Svelte.js, Calcite Components, and the ArcGIS API for JavaScript to build an application. So Svelte is admittedly a framework I haven't really used extensively. I tried it a while ago. I have a couple blog posts about it, and I was interested, but I just hadn't had a chance to really use it. I have recently, and I really like it. Recently, I've also been using Vue.js, which is another one of my favorites, and I have to say, Svelte is creeping up there. I like it a lot. The two are very similar in the ways you kind of write code, but one of the things I like both about Svelte and Vue.js is that I can use web components, like Calcite components, pretty seamlessly. There's not an awful lot you need to do to use them in these particular frameworks. So Calcite components is a web component and design system that is provided as part of the ArcGIS platform. You can install it, build apps with it, and it's under the same license as the ArcGIS API for JavaScript. They have really good documentation. They have these great examples of how to use different components. But one of the things I really like is they have this really great section on tutorials. And in particular, they have one about creating a map. We're going to go ahead and go over the creating a map tutorial today, but I'm going to talk about how you can use it with Svelte instead of just the regular vanilla tutorial that they're going to run you through. My buddy Gavin works at Esri, also wrote a really great blog post on how to use Svelte with the ArcGIS API for JavaScript. This is a great blog post if you're just interested in getting started and the ease of use of getting everything set up. He did some pretty cool stuff in here. Showed me a couple things which I wasn't quite aware of, and it's great. I highly recommend it. Go check it out. So let's dive right in and start building an app. All right, so to get started building an app, we're going to use Vite, which is currently the recommended way to get started using Svelte. So it's going to be npm create, and I'm going to call Vite latest, and I'm going to name my project Svelte Calcite. I'm going to pick Svelte from the list of frameworks. I'll use regular JavaScript for this particular demo. Normally I would use TypeScript, but I don't want to get into any little things that might pop up. Let's go ahead and install everything. Let's go ahead and install the JavaScript API as well, since I'm already here. And let's stick with the regular version just to make sure everything works as expected. Awesome. Now let's take a look at what we got. Okay, so the first thing you're going to see is you're going to have this really basic application that the template's going to give you. And it has a counter that's got some state. I can just update the properties as I click it. And it's going to quickly update my application. Just to give you a quick intro in how Svelte works, you can look at this particular demo and get a pretty good idea how things are going to get thrown together. So let's go and scrap all that and let's start following the tutorial once I empty some stuff out here. So let's get rid of the script tag code here. I'm going to get rid of everything inside the template part, and I'm just going to keep it as a div. I'm going to call it a view div class, and let's get rid of all the styles in here. Awesome. Okay, so I'm going to go and I'm going to delete the lib folder because we're not going to be using that component that's in there. So the CSS for files going to look like this. I'm going to bring in the Calcite component CSS as well as the JavaScript API CSS, some basic HTML here, and that is it. Okay, so right now it's going to be an empty page. We haven't done anything yet. So let's go ahead and follow the tutorial so we can get something that looks similar to this. Where just to give you a quick idea, I can click on the action bar over here and I can open up various widgets and get some information about the actual item as well. So the web map has some information here. So let's work through this here and see what we can do. So we already did the CSS part. I've got my view div in here. I've imported my JavaScript. I've imported my CSS. I've not imported JavaScript yet. So let's go ahead and do that. So it's going to be doing this. It's going to have some the web map, map view, and some various widgets. So let's get that stuff all in here. And I'm going to need my API key as well. So we have a section here on using an API key. So I've got my JavaScript in here and I brought the config in there, but I need to set up my API keys. So let me create an environment variable, set up an env file. That's what we call vite API key, and that's going to be equal to my API key. So I'm going to grab that here, like so. Done with that. So now what I can say inside my project, I can say config.api key is equal to import.meta.env.vite API key. Awesome. So what is next on my list? Now I've done the API key, so let's go ahead and display the map. So I need a way to go ahead and display the map. I'm not going to bother with the URL params because I don't want to kind of make this demo any more complicated than it needs to be, but we'll just keep it pretty basic here. So I'm actually going to take a cue from something that Gavin showed me in his blog post, where I can create this function called create map, and it's going to take a DOM element, and I'm going to use this function to go ahead and create my map for me. So let me do that. So let's create my map. Let's create my view, and the container is going to be the element that gets past this method. Here's my map, and you can see here it's got some padding as well. That padding is going to be so that there's room for the action bar, so it's going to just add that then. Left 49. Perfect. So what I can do now is that on here, I can go and say, give it a use. I'm not sure if these are called directives. I can't remember what they're actually called in Svelte land, but that's kind of what I've gotten used to calling them, is directives. Oh, I need to give this, let's define the style as well. So it's going to be height 100% and width 100%. And we're good to go. So if I come to Svelte over here, here is our map displayed in our page. You can see we got the padding for the 49 pixels over here, or points, I can't remember, and that's going to be enough to be able to display the action bar here. It's going to go ahead and open the widgets for us. Okay, awesome. So we've got that part done. The next bit here, I'm going to need to also move the zoom button to the side, so let's do that. Okay, so the next part here is going to create my widgets. However, I don't necessarily have the elements just yet, and I'm going to show you a technique to do this in Svelte that I think is pretty cool. So let's skip ahead real quick to creating the layout. So I'm going to skip all these small details in here about creating the shell, the header, and the shell panels and stuff. Even the action bars, I'm going to kind of skip to all this, but I'll show you in comparison what it's going to look like if I were to just kind of start copy pasting bits and pieces in here. So give me 1 second here. Okay, so let's look at how this is almost identical to what you would copy paste from the tutorial. All right, so here's my calcite shell with the content behind, just the way it's described. Here's my header with the slot for the header inside the shell, and the shell panel, along with the action bar. And other than the formatting, this is pretty much a copy paste directly from the tutorial. So little bits and pieces that are slightly different is that when I define the panels that are going to be used for the widgets down here, you can see that I'm binding them to these particular variables. I have a layer list container, BMG container for the base map gallery, a legend container, bookmarks container, and a print container. And for the description part, for the small card here, I've got this item thumbnail URL, item description, but again, those look almost exactly to what you would see inside of here. So let me go ahead and play around with this here and show you how I did that. So what I do at the very top is I define these variables for the different container parts. Then I use the syntax to bind this element, the div element, to that variable. That's what the syntax means here. It's a way you can do this with Svelte to bind particular variables together. Very, very cool. This also works if this were a component that, say, for example, had a variable called value. I could do bind value equals something like my value. That's what that would look like. Of course, this div element doesn't have that, so I don't need to do that. But you can see how that kind of works. Very, very cool. Very neat way to do something. So if I come over here to Svelte, you can see that's kind of working. Not quite. I mean, my page is kind of all wonky. I've got this giant header up here. I also have this item object that is going to be equal to the portal item once I'm done setting all this up. Right now, it's just an empty object, right? So how do I fix this? I've brought the CSS in. There's one other thing you need to do when you are working with Calcite components inside of something like Svelte. And the same applies if I were doing a Vue.js application. So this imports are going to be for the ArcGIS JS API. We're going to do some more imports for Calcite components here. So I need to import the individual components I'm going to use. And this is going to make it so that now these components are going to get loaded. Like so. Awesome. Look at that. Everything's all set up almost there. Now, if I want to get rid of this loading bit here, I can actually add a little bit of code down here. I can say that map.when. That basically means that when the map is loaded and ready to go, I can say that item is going to be equal to map.portal_item. And now I've got the title that's coming from the portal item being displayed here. That is very, very cool. So I need to do a little bit more work here to get everything to kind of load up. Now you'll notice that in my code here, I've got my bookmarks container, the base map gallery container, bound to various elements here. However, this function create map only runs when the div that the map is going to be displayed in is loaded. There's no guarantee that these other bindings are going to be available to me just yet. So let me come up here and just kind of demonstrate that. So if I say that after I've done my view and I go something like console.log layer list container, then we look at the console here, you can see that's undefined here, right? So it didn't load. It's not ready for me yet. It means I got to do something a little different here. I could take advantage of use some functions that Svelte provides to do something like this. So I'm going to load onMount, and onMount is a function that will run when this component is mounted, right? Kind of self-explanatory. So I need to move this code over here. So let's grab this, like so, move it in here. However, I no longer have this element that comes from the create map method over here. So let me create another variable to bind stuff to. So call this view container. And we're going to say that this is going to be the container for the map. Awesome. So let's get rid of this create map method here. And let's come down here to where it's throwing an error now. And instead of saying using the use method, we're going to bind this element to the view container, like so. And if this runs correctly, it should still work exactly as expected to before. And there we go. So everything is working as expected. Now I can go ahead and start doing the actual widgets in here. So it has some code up here in the tutorial to create all of the widgets like here. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, but instead of referencing the IDs the way the tutorial does, I'm going to reference the variables to create those widgets. So let me get that done here. And let's go ahead and put that before the map when, but after I move the zoom button. Awesome. Now if we look at the page here, you can't tell because we haven't bound up the action bar yet. These panels that the widgets are in are still hidden. So let's get that kind of worked out here. So if we come down to the tutorial a little bit, it's going to explain how some of that logic is going to work. Come back to the tutorial here, and it's going to talk about making the components interactive, right? So it has this code here that is going to set an active widget on this handlebar, handle action bar click, and then do some work here. So let's just copy this code as is directly from here. And this doesn't need to go in my onMount method. This can actually be completely separate from everything else. And I'm going to leave it like this, just straight copy paste. Now, if we notice over here, though, what it's doing is it's grabbing the Calcite action bar and adding a click event listener to it. I can actually put that directly on the action bar over here, like so, using this syntax on colon click, and then set it to a particular method that I want it to click on. So if I run it like that, the only thing drawback here, again, I'm not using TypeScript, so these are not, it doesn't recognize them as being typed correctly. There's no active on this element that it knows of. There's no hidden on the element that it knows of. It doesn't realize that these are calcite elements. That's something that I could do in TypeScript, but in regular JavaScript, not necessarily. So, okay, so here's our application. Now I click on the layers. There's my layers. There's my base map, and yes, I can change everything in here just as expected. Pretty cool. Here's my legend. Here are all my bookmarks. So I got different bookmarks to different areas on the map. That's really nice. The print widgets, if I want to print this out, this would still work. And then information for the web map. So this doesn't look styled correctly. So if I come over here a bit, it's going to give me some styles in here that I can reference right here. So let's grab some of this code here, and we'll put that into our style tag down below, like so. And if I come back over here, this should now be styled correctly. There we go. Awesome. Very, very cool, right? Now you notice here, again, I tried to point out that the code here looks almost exactly like I would copy paste directly from the tutorial, right? The calcite panel for the description, all the way up to the action bars and the different panels and everything is almost an exact copy, just with a little bit of syntactic sugar that I can use with Svelte to reference various elements. Now, if I were going to push this as a production application, I might update this code here so that these are actually calcite components that I can reference and have the proper typings for. So I have the active and hidden property in there. I'll also probably make sure that each individual widget that's being referenced would have its own variable defined for it, and then I can just kind of cycle through the widgets in here much more easily. That would probably be something I want to do for a production application as well. But yeah, there you go. I just kind of wanted to highlight how you can follow this tutorial but use it in Svelte. Now, I didn't do everything in here. I didn't bother with some of the dynamically resizing that it does for the action bar in here, right? And adjust the view padding and stuff. And that would be for some other bits. I didn't add a loader component in here as well. I'm gonna just kind of leave that as is. I have this little loading text at the top just kind of make up for it, but that is also something else I could dive into. One cool thing I could do is I could probably componentize this Svelte component. I could take this whole shell, make it its own component that would have a slot inside of it, and then that slot could be the actual map itself, right? That requires a little bit more logic. I probably have to work with Svelte stores at that point and just do a little bit of store work, not a lot, just some pieces here to make sure things get updated as expected. So that's probably going to be for a part 2 that I will do at a later date. But again, I just want to point out how easy it is to use Svelte with Calcite Components and the JavaScript API to build awesome mapping applications. Okay, so if you enjoyed that, be sure to like the video and subscribe if you haven't already. If you have any questions, please drop them down below or leave any comment that you like. I'll see you next time. Thank you. I just want to let you know that I've started a new podcast called The Bounding Box, where I'll be talking about geo development, web development, and everything in between. You can find it on Apple Podcasts, on Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, and plenty of other places that you can find podcasts. There are a few episodes available now. We are in a bi-weekly schedule, so every other week. Thank you.